Good evening. Will the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, July 18th, 2001, please come to order? For the benefit of those who have not participated in a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, our procedures are as follows. We will read the legal call of the meeting as published in local newspapers. The applicant will be invited to come forward and present the case, explaining to the Commission and others present what is being requested of the property. Comments of town agencies will be read for each application if there are any. There will be clarifying questions from the commissioners. Then there will be an opportunity for clarifying questions from the audience. First, those who wish to support the application may come forward, and second, those people opposed the application will then be invited to come forward and express their opinion. At this public hearing, as this is a public hearing, it must be recorded, and it is necessary for speakers to identify themselves and state their name and addresses before addressing the commission. The applicant is free to leave or remain for the balance of the public hearing and the regular meeting, at which time the commission will reach a decision on each application. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decision of the commission and has a right to appeal to Superior Court if desired. Decisions of this meeting are available the day after the meeting by calling the Planning and Zoning Office at 203-453-8039 after 9 a.m. Seated tonight are Scott Edmonds, Jason Marquis, Alan Brown, myself, Richard Wallace, and Sean Cosgrove. Staff present, George Kral, Aaron Mannix, Lisa Piambino, and our videographer is Peter Schultz. The secretary will now read the legal call of notice.
Notice is hereby given that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on July 18th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. at location Nathaniel B. Green Community Center, 32 Church Street, Guilford, Connecticut, Monogatug Room, for the following purposes. Proposed amendment to zoning code regarding elimination of mandatory continuation of public hearings. Guilford Agricultural Society, 111 Lovers Lane, map 40, lot 138, zone R3, special permit, request for modification of the existing special permit conditions regarding scheduling and types of events. Special permit request to construct 4 accessory structures over 750 square feet. Town of Guilford Municipal Project, public water main extension along 13,000 feet of public and private road right-of-ways of Mulberry Point, Tuttle's Point, and Long Cove Association. Quattro's Italian Cuisine Restaurant, 14B Water Street, map 32, lot 45, zone C1, special permit to allow for expansions of outdoor seating. Copies of these applications are available for inspection in the office of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Town Hall South, 50 Boston Street, Guilford, Connecticut. At this hearing, persons may attend and be heard, and written communications will be received. Dated Guilford, Connecticut, this 25th day of June, 2018.
Thank you, Sean. George?
Quattro's has requested a continuation to the August 2nd hearing, so if anyone's here for that, August 1st, I'm sorry. They don't need to stay.
As George just said, anyone here for Quattro's extended seating has been moved to August 1st. First on the agenda, Nathaniel Tucker Yarrow, 165 Dromora Road. Basically, I'm going to ask, was there anything changed since your last presentation?
No, nothing has changed. Thank you. Good evening, by the way.
Just to complete, identify yourself.
Yes, my name is Nathaniel Yarrow, and I live at 165 Dromera Road, and this is my wife, Rachel Yarrow, and she lives at 165 Dromera Road.
Any of the commissioners have any questions?
Has the new septic system been installed?
It's scheduled to be installed this week. And we've done the clearing for the new septic. Yep, so it will be.
And that will be inspected when it's done.
They have to get a permit from the health department, and we'll get their septic permit, correct.
It's also a condition on the proposed.
Do you have anything? No? All right. Any members of the public have any questions? Any speaking in favor? Any speaking against? Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, the Guilford Ag Society. Barbara?
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of the Guilford Agricultural Society. It's Barbara Hammerlin. Been a 60-year resident of Guilford, and I'm Assistant Secretary for the Ag Society. We have come to the board to request an amendment of our special permit that is existing to have the 6-month rule eliminated, and also to be able to have for-profit events as well as nonprofit events. The monies that come from these events that we rent the grounds for goes right back into the fairgrounds. It goes into the maintenance of the building, the maintenance of the grounds, and goes towards putting on each annual fair. The cost of the fair is well over $350,000 a year to put on. And if we have a rain out, it's not a good thing, I can tell you that. What we are looking at,
The mics are only for the television, for GCTV.
We're having trouble hearing.
what we're looking at is we would be limiting the number of events to 20 events, excluding the town fireworks, the town's Earth Day event, the school races, and the annual Guilford Fair. Okay? Right now, we have 17 events that are going on the fair. So we're just asking for 3 more. Okay? Any evening event that would have music associated with it, the music would have to cease at 10 p.m., period. They would have an hour to clean up and be off the grounds. But that is what we're proposing, is that the music stops at 10 p.m. for any other music event on the grounds. We don't hold events every single weekend, spring, summer, and fall. That, if anybody takes a look at our schedule, you will see that. Quite a few of the events only run a few hours long, not all day long or all night long, especially the races. People are there, they do their race, and then they're gone. When there's nothing going on at the fairgrounds, the whole neighborhood, as well as the community, has a wonderful place of open space. And I can tell you some of the things that happen at the fairgrounds that are community and town oriented, besides the fireworks and Earth Day. The fire department at times uses the grounds for training. The police at times use the grounds for training. There's 2 plus or minus weeks that we have had trucks stored there for storm cleanups, like Asplund or any of the tree trimming, CL&P. They need a place to park their trucks while they're cleaning the town up from master storms, okay? At least for 3 winters, the town has requested to dump snow that has built up on the green on the fairgrounds. So sometimes in the winter, you might see piles of snow. That's from the town, okay? The scouts have utilized it to do their rocket trials or whatever. There's about 30 dog walkers a day. Now, mind you, this is private property, and the parking lot area, people walk their dogs through, about 30 a day, and we also have people that are running or jogging through there because it's safe for them. They're not on the road. And then, of course, the school races, and then we've even seen parents down there teaching their kids how to drive. Okay?
That's where I learned how to drive.
So, and then we've had many, many people tell us how wonderful it is to have the grounds there and how wonderful they are looking, and we're trying our best to keep them up and everything else. I don't really think that we're asking for a whole lot. We know there's other organizations out there that have events that go on that don't have to go through the hoops that we do. As far as the buildings, we had constructed 2 pole barn buildings. One we ended up enclosing in, as was requested. What we're doing is we're asking for approval for future building. We're not building anything right now. We don't have the funds to put those buildings up. But those buildings will be exactly the same as the 2 new buildings that are down there. They will be, we have to rent tents every year to put our exhibits in, okay? So what we're doing is we're just replacing the tents with pole barns. There will be 2 that will be open, one for the cattle department, one for the sheep and goat department. The other 2 will be enclosed. One will be for the vegetables and flowers. The other will be for poultry and rabbits. And then that is it. That replaces our tents that we're renting every year, and it will give us a little extra storage. And I'm not saying that it won't be utilized, you know, I mean, the space is utilized already, but it will help because it'll be undercover or enclosed. And we can maneuver things with that. I do have a couple letters. I don't know if you want me to read them or
Do
not.
you have one from the Ag Society itself?
No, I have one from Nancy Elderbaum, Martha Lombard, and Todd Raskin.
I guessed.
Okay. This is from Todd Raskin. Dear members of the Guilford Agricultural Society and Commission, as a resident of 35 Lovers Lane, our property borders the fairgrounds. Living directly near the fairgrounds, I would like to express my support of any and all of the cultural, recreational, and fundraiser activities held there. These occasions have brought much enrichment into our family's life, and we feel so fortunate to be so close to these events. We would be extremely disappointed if this space was not used accordingly as it has shaped our life here in Guilford. Thank you for taking time to consider the neighbor's opinion. Todd Raskin. This is from Nancy Elderbaum, and this is the first time I've seen it, so I'm reading the best I can here. It's the first time I've seen any of them. Dear Planning and Zoning Committee members, I find it hard to believe that the full use of the Guilford Fairgrounds is even being questioned. One of the reasons we bought our home on Old Whitfield Street was the historic and valued use of this area. We especially appreciated the fairgrounds right around the corner and the potential for the full use of this community gem. That some area residents complain is hard to understand given that the fairgrounds have been here for many, many years. I have little time for those who moved here knowing that the fairgrounds are in the neighborhood and now are upset that the Agricultural Society would like to make full use of their property. I am tired of the minority opinion trying to rule the majority. The fairgrounds and the community events they host provide a greater good for a larger number, and the few voices of those who moved in knowingly adjacent to the property should not be allowed to speak for all of us who live on Whitfield Street. I am tired of such NIMBY attitudes and those who hypocritically use zoning laws to further their own exclusive agendas. I support the full use of the fairgrounds and look forward to attending more inclusive events. Sincerely, Nancy Elderbaum. This one is from Ed and Martha Lombard. Dear Planning and Zoning, as lifelong residents and neighbor to the Guilford Agricultural Society, we would like to voice our support in favor of the proposed special permit. We have personally attended many of the past events with family and friends. We have never had a problem with any of the events and have found that the organizers and patrons of these events are very respectful of the neighbors. We look forward to attending future events in the fairgrounds and think that it is great that they are allowed to help different organizations by providing a venue for events. Please feel free to contact us with any questions or concern about our support. I will give you these.
Does... Almost.
All right.
No.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, George.
Are you finished, Barbara?
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, there's two aspects to this proposed special permit modification. One aspect is to modify the special permit conditions of approval. The original one was granted in 1989, and then it was modified a few years ago. And then the second part of the application is seeking approval of the 4 new buildings that Barbara mentioned. We do have plans for those 4 new buildings. As Barbara said, they don't intend to build those buildings now, but should they be approved by the commission, then they would be authorized to get building permits in the future whenever they want to build them. The building permit, the building portion of this application is also pending, action by you is pending inland wetlands action. As you know, you can't take action on an application that requires inland wetlands approval until the Wetlands Commission has acted. So you...
Have they cited the additional structures or not?
Have they what?
Cited them?
Yes, they're
On
on.
the site plan?
Okay.
Yes, they're on the
Yes.
plan. They haven't made an application yet to the...
Yes, they have.
Oh, they have, okay.
Yep, we have
So-
an application, but it most likely will not be acted on until September.
Right, in fact, we have a
So-
letter from Kevin McGee.
Right, so
stating
this
such.
the public hearing will have to remain open until action by the
But
Inland
you could-
Wetlands Commission.
You could act on the portion of the application that deals with the special permit conditions. You don't need wetlands decision to do that.
So so what you're saying is regarding the event schedule and the 6 months ahead notice before us, we can move forward to next meeting.
That does require another public hearing, as
Correct.
you probably know. Let me just also review, especially for those members who haven't been around, that weren't part of this original kind of discussion. This has been ongoing for a while. The original special permit granted in May of 1989 has a condition and reads as follows, that the uses of this property be limited to agricultural fairs, craft shows, auto shows, and similar activities of a nonprofit nature, and that musical events, including concerts, are expressly prohibited except as accessory to one of the above activities. And one part of the application that Barbara described is to eliminate that nonprofit condition, so that that would no longer be a requirement for events that they might
And
want
that
to hold.
events would not have to be associated with another event.
Pardon me?
That events would not have to be associated with another event.
No, it could be any kind of event, as long as it was part of their proposal is to eliminate the limitation to nonprofit entity. Now, the other part is to eliminate the condition of approval that was granted in 2016, which requires, and I think that rather than me trying to summarize it, I'll read exactly what it says. it's a little bit awkward the way it's written, but it says, in order to ensure that all activities on the site, including activities in the barn and pavilion area, are in accordance with the 1989 special permit, the Agricultural Society shall submit to the Planning and Zoning Commission a description of all events or special activities that are proposed on the site at least 6 months in advance of the proposed event. It is anticipated that the Commission will review the proposed activities and inform the Agricultural Society if any proposed use is not in accordance with the condition imposed by the 1989 special permit. The Commission may, but shall not be required, to hear comments from the public as to whether any particular proposed event is in conformance with the 1989 special permit. Any party aggrieved by the Commission's decision shall have a right to appeal to the Superior Court. So they're seeking to eliminate that condition of approval, so they would no longer be obligated to notify you in advance, 6 months in advance of any pending events, and replace that condition with the condition language that Barb just read about the 20 events and the other things that are in the written statement that I think you have. So is that more or less clear what's on the table then?
I was part of the 2016
Right.
back, it was a little contentious, but what I was going to, wanted to clarify, or make you clarify for your own sake, is that these additional structures aren't going to be pavilions and things like that,
Well,
where you,
they're going to be,
They're
they'll be the
enclosed.
same type, well, 2 will be open for the lot because they're livestock. We cannot have those closed. Not for cattle and not for sheep and goats. That just doesn't happen. I will, I had talked to one of the neighbors that had called me, and we all know that the issue came up because of the Renaissance Fair. There won't be a Renaissance Fair, okay? I want to just clarify that. I said, but there could be another cattle show or horse show or something beyond the fair, but that is an agricultural use. So I'm not saying it's happening. It's something we've talked about. We were trying to get a breed cattle show there so that just to have something for people to come to. That's agricultural.
I remember someone asking, well, you could have weddings there every Saturday.
Well, yeah, and that's not the case. Would we have an occasional wedding or class reunion there? Yes, but we will have specifics of what they will have to follow. I mean, that's why I said, if there's...
Those would be subject to the 20 event limitation as well.
What's that?
The-
Yes,
any-
yes, exactly.
Right,
Is there currently a limitation on the number of events?
no.
So this is more of, they're just proposing that they would impose a 20 event limit on themselves?
Well, presumably, if the commission agrees, you would revise the special permit language to include that 20 event limitation. It wouldn't be just voluntarily on their part, it would be, they're proposing that, and should you agree, you could make that a condition of the special permit in the future. Let me just also say something about the administration of the 6-month limit. As I think the commission knows, it's been awkward to actually adhere to that requirement that at 6 months' notice before any events occur, you need to be informed. There have been a number of occasions when I, and/or you, have been informed of events that came up within that window. And a couple of them were very de minimis type events, running races and similar category of events that didn't appear to be likely to create any controversy, and we have allowed those events notwithstanding the 6-month rule.
Should we shorten the rule? Shorten it to 2 months or 3 months?
Well, that's something that you can discuss in deliberation. Right now, the proposal by the Ag Society is to eliminate that advance notice provision entirely.
And I'll tell you why, and I think George kind of brought this up. We have had occasions where somebody will call, they tried to get, say, Fireman's Field or somewhere else, and they couldn't get in there, so they call us and it's, so to speak, last minute. A good example was the Song Fest that was at the fairgrounds. That's a prime example of, we were contacted, there was no way that there would be any time, but we wanted to support that event and support the community in that, so we went and asked about it.
So in terms of the nature of additional events, I think you mentioned in your comments the possibility or the contemplation of concerts.
No, I should clarify that. I meant like with a wedding or a class reunion, if there was music involved with that,
Oh.
that,
There wouldn't be a standalone event with a musical band that would be on a stage that would,
well, most of the weddings in that have really, would be looking at utilizing the enclosed building.
The original special permit anticipated that possibility and included a prohibition against events that were strictly musical concerts, not music associated with some other event like a wedding, the Lobster Fest, or the fair, where there's clearly music, but it's, in some sense or another, subsidiary to the primary purpose of the event.
that's really the gist of my question, so
The
that.
pro- the prohibition of that original special permit, that of a music concert, a freestanding musical concert would not be permitted under that original special permit. And I don't think that they're asking that that be modified or changed.
No, I'm not asking that.
Yes.
I mean,
People were worried that, that Bruce Springsteen, there would be a concert, with 100,000
Yeah,
people
I'm thinking
there.
about I grew up in Lover's Lane, and the sound effects all around
Right.
Whitfield Street, Boston Street, Lover's Lane.
you get that from the green. When we've been down there setting up for different things, or cleaning up, any event, music event that's on the green, you can hear it clear as day down there.
Is 10 o'clock the official town ordinance for noise?
I don't know. That
think it's
is,
later than that.
yeah, that's another aspect of this whole question, is the applicability of the town's noise ordinance. The town does have a noise ordinance that prohibits music being produced on a property, and that music or that sound exceeding a certain decibel level off premises. However, for events that are going to have music where that's clearly going to be violated, the event sponsor can petition the Board of Selectmen for, in effect, a waiver of that particular provision, allowing them to have the music where clearly it would be loud and off premises, but the Board of Selectmen have to approve that on a case-by-case basis, and then the Board of Selectmen can impose reasonable conditions on that particular activity, or on that particular noise, quote-unquote noise, like it has to be over by 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever they might choose. So that, the noise ordinance supplements whatever special permit conditions the Planning and Zoning Commission might impose.
Currently, with the special permit, though, there's no distinction about what time the noise would
No.
have to end.
No.
How about, she mentioned they would be given 1 hour to clean up and leave the grounds. Is there anything in the current special permit that talks about that?
No.
I know that I found that out from some of the other facilities that hold weddings or reunions, whatever have you. So I have done some homework on that, so they all follow pretty much the same.
One other question I had, is the Guilford, there was mention about nonprofit. Is the Guilford Agricultural Society a nonprofit organization?
Yes, we are. Have been since 1859.
So, not to pry, but is this application and the expectation of additional events due to the fact that the Agricultural Society needs to generate more revenue?
Well, the upkeep of the buildings, and we have to, from time to time, upgrade the electrical, the water, and everything on the ground. So, yes, it's a way to help us to, again, maintain our buildings and maintain the grounds.
The question is, then what's the need for taking away that designation of nonprofit in that first part that George talked about?
Because it would allow us to, it would allow us to have a class reunion or wedding down there. We have been approached several times because other places have not been available.
So wouldn't that more be changing the type of events that are available as opposed to whether or not it's nonprofit?
Yeah, I don't know the origin of the nonprofit idea back in 1989. Why? I mean, yeah.
Obviously,
I mean,
I wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, are nonprofit events inherently less noisy than for-profit events?
I mean,
I don't know.
I suppose if the land is owned by a nonprofit, then anything that they're doing should be considered nonprofit.
It could be, I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, the other distinction,
I'm not sure about that. I think nonprofit groups do hold events on their properties that are associated with for-profit ventures, but the whole purpose is to generate revenue for the nonprofit. You know, the Griswold House held the Antiques Fair on that property for, no, but the Antiques Fair, there were all of the antiques vendors were for-profit on their field, so.
Okay.
Is there a way we could email out a PDF to the commission, the 89 agreement?
sure. And
Yeah,
the
that'd be
and the 2016 Latin language, yes.
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah, we can do that.
There is a letter. Should we read the letter in from Kevin McGee? Go for it.
The application from Dennis Johnson here, too. The application proposed the application proposed animal exhibit barns will not conflict with the locations of the operation of septic system currently in. Do you have a copy of this?
No, I don't have, I.
Well, if you want it,
get
it's
a
right
copy.
here. Then we have one from a site plan review.
No, but we're going to be doing that.
Huh?
Yeah, you could read that in, but that's going to, because that's tied up into to the wetlands permit. We're going to have to probably wait on that one.
Yeah, but it's here. Do you want to read it or not? Do we read it?
We can read it in.
To
We
go
just
for that.
take action until.
The Guilford Agricultural Society is proposed to construct.
Just, that won't help. No.
The Guilford Agricultural Society is proposed to construct 4 new buildings and 2 show rings. A view of the site plan shows that several buildings will be constructed within Inland Wetlands Commission Regulation Review Area. Applications to the Wetland Inland Commission was submitted July 16, 2018. The Guilford Inland Wetlands Commission will review the application at the August 8th meeting in 2018. The meeting will act on the application on September 12th, 2018. I recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission table this application until it is reviewed, until after the Inland Wetlands Commission acts on the application. Now, the only other thing out here is the one that you have the rules by,
Yeah, that's
that we've been talking about.
She presented pretty much everything that was on it.
Yeah, it is, what,
Those show rings, during the fair, they're portable fencing that gets put up and gets taken down, so we're not building any show rings.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Jason, Alan, you okay, Sean?
I'm fine.
you know
Any-
about the free use for the town, the town is going to provide for you? The town is going to provide the fire department 8 weeks, 8 weeks for a rescue drill, the police department, Earth Day, 2 weeks for trucks during the storm for cleanup, at least 3 winter for at least 3 winters for dumping snow removal from the town green. Scouts use this for rockets and such. 30-dog walk day, same amount of people just running and walking. School races 2 and 3 per year, and parents and teachers and kids drive. I have personally had dozens of people tell me that the grounds have been meticulously maintained and is a big asset for the town of Guilford.
This is a copy. So, pass around. The 2 memos that were just read.
Any questions from the public?
Well, since we couldn't hear along, we don't know what's going on.
Come forward and identify, please. No comments or
Hi,
questions?
I'm Kathy Mack. I'm a neighbor of the fairgrounds. I live at two- I live at 212 Whitfield Street, and I've lived there for over 21 years. And my first question is to George, which is, what is the purpose? Why does the fairgrounds need a special permit? What is the purpose of a special permit?
Well, those are 2 separate questions. Under their zoning regulations, facilities of a nonprofit nature are allowed by special permit. The purpose of the special permit requirements is to authorize uses subject to all of the standards and criteria of the special permit process, which include public health, safety, neighborhood impact criteria, a wide variety of standards.
And then, Barbara, do you have a list with you of the events that took place this year?
If you want to go on to the town of Guilford, listen to me. If you want to go on to the Guilford Agricultural Society's website, it's guilfordfair.org, and under About, there is a list, there's a heading Events. Just click on that and list all the events.
All the events,
Yes.
including the races and the,
Yep.
okay, good, that's excellent.
Anybody can go on at any time to check what events are happening on the fairgrounds.
Okay, good, thanks.
Any other questions? You're going to, please, yes.
I'm going to make this short because I have more questions later. You know, a problem, my name is Kent Bloomer, and I live on 988 Leeds Island Road. We're talking about building structures, right, on the fairgrounds. When will the appearance of those structures and the site plan be released to the public? That's my question.
Well, right now, I think procedurally, as George said, we're not going to act on any buildings until they have wetland approval.
I see. But when they do that, they will be released?
They're released now, they're public information.
They've been included in the application.
And how does that information get passed around to the public?
Well, people can come in and look at the files and the applications in the Planning and Zoning Office.
Come in and look at the files? What does that mean?
Come and look at the application, the materials with the application, including the
So,
plans.
so there's no effort to advertise or display these changes to the public, is that correct? That the public has to, a person has to take the initiative to come and check out the files?
Yes, that's correct.
I think that's unreasonable, but let's bring this up later. Thank you.
Anyone else? So we're going to move the special permit on the events. We'll close that hearing now and continue.
There may be
Oh,
people-
anybody against?
Well, comments for.
Comments.
Do you want to do comments for first or comments against?
It doesn't matter. Pardon? Anybody for? Then anybody against?
My name's Pete Perugini. I live at 200 Whitfield Street. I own the closest residential structure to the building. If you saw the site plan, there are one existing building on the right and a proposed one right behind it. My renovated carriage house is the closest residential structure to that structure. I work in town, been here for, working in town for almost 20 years. I've chosen to raise my family here. As I was 4 years ago when this came up originally, and the discussion started about the 89 special permit and the construction of the structures, I'm supportive of the Ag Society. I'm thankful to all the volunteers that donate their time and their efforts to continue the traditions of the fair and the other community events. I think they're wonderful. It's one of the reasons that attracted me to town is the community atmosphere and what's there. My concerns are and always have been, and going back to 4 years ago, expanded use of the site, unchecked expanded use of the site, and noise. Being close, the traffic doesn't bother me, the garbage doesn't bother me. Those aren't my issues, but my issues are noise, and specifically amplified sounds are where I have sensitivities. So, as the board is aware, the fairgrounds is about 28 acres. It's located in an R3 zone, surrounded by residential neighborhoods, as everybody has mentioned. The governance of the property, as George has said, is under a special permit from 1989, which is not as clear as it could be, and prior to the changes from 2 years ago, per the admission of the zoning office, was difficult to enforce. As a reminder, there's many new faces. I remember Mr. Wallace, Commissioner Wallace, but just to set the stage for the board, where we were 4 years ago, we had 2 new buildings constructed with no permits, no building, planning and zoning, inland wetlands. We had repeated multi-year violations of the conditions of the 89 special permit with events that were held there. We had concerns expressed by many neighbors relating to traffic, safety, noise, and expanded usage. We had unfruitful discussions with the Ag Society and their representatives, including their council that was ordered by the previous members of this commission. The town selectman's office and the town attorney also were involved, and that's what resulted in the modified special permit that you see from 2016. The current application is seeking approval for additional structures, which would make the property more attractive from a rental standpoint, obviously. And the current application is asking for removal of conditions that in effect limit the number of events and specifically adds to the types of events, reunions, weddings, both of which could contain amplified sound and or music. Also, it's clear that this property is in a residential zone. A commercial business trying to operate under the same mandate that they're requesting would never be allowed in R3 zone. And this potential expansion, let's call it what it is, it could be perceived as a commercial operation outside of the mandate of a not-for-profit, which is an agricultural society. I'm not sure how weddings and reunions relate to agricultural events, horse racing, horse shows, those are all great community events, all for it, but amplified music from a DJ every Saturday night, 19 events, there's 12 weekends of the summer. It's excessive in my opinion. I respectfully ask the board, just as they did 2 years ago, to consider the effects that noise, nuisance, whether it's amplified or other sound, safety, traffic, and potential real estate devaluation that these changes could possibly have on the residential neighborhoods adjacent to the property, and the long-term nature of the decisions made. This permit is not written great, and it's still in there from 1989, so a change has long repercussions to the neighborhood. I'd end with a comment that the last 2 years operating under the 2016 changes have been pleasant and a big improvement over the previous years. And from my standpoint as a neighbor. So, thank you.
Anyone else with questions against, or speak against?
Good afternoon. My name's Monty Crow. I live at 212 Whitfield Street. My property directly abuts the property on Lovers Lane that the Ag Society owns. So if you're looking from Lovers Lane onto the Ag property, their rear of their property is my property's line as well. So I oppose any changes to the special permit. And I have, a few reasons for that. I've outlined them in a written document, basically written in a memorandum of law. I'd like to introduce that, submit it. I'm going to read from it. But before I do that, I'd also like to ask the commissioners to take a look at some photographs that I took just the other day. I walked my property line that abuts their property line. These are some, and I'd also like these submitted into the record. These are some photographs of basically broken down implements, a backhoe, an old horse trailer, an old flatbed trailer, all kinds of pieces of wood. You can see for yourself. I'm sure you guys had no idea. You basically have an unlicensed junkyard going on. And I take particular exception to that because some of that stuff, and you're going to see it, actually encroaches onto my property. So we've never really brought it up, even though we've known that's been there for years and years. Similar to Mr. Perugini, who spoke just before me, we actually enjoy most, if not all, what the Ag Society does with the property. And we know it benefits the town. It benefits us. Who doesn't like the fireworks show? Who doesn't like the fair? But it gets noisy. And unless you're down there when these things are going on, you don't know how noisy it gets. And as the memorandum of law outlined, you have to be really careful when you're granting a special use permit in a residential neighborhood that is also part of a historic district. You actually have a higher standard, and that hasn't really been spoken about ever in any of these hearings. Our own code actually imposes a special standard when you introduce something such as noise onto a historic district property. And you also have to, it's mandated in our code, and it's outlined in my memorandum, but at section 27380 sub F sub 2, the code instructs the commission to concern itself with the property which is the subject of the special permit application, and in a case where it's in a National Register historic district, you have to consider the impacts on all the surrounding properties as well. It talks about the use shall be in harmony with and conform to the appropriate and orderly development of the town and the neighborhood, and will not hinder or discourage the development and use of adjacent lots, of which I have one, or impact the value thereof. Further states that when you're in a historic district, the introduction of visual, audible, or atmospheric elements that are out of character with the property or the setting or the surrounding properties is a violation of our own code. And again, we've never addressed that, but I'm addressing it now. So if you're going to have a wedding, if you're going to have, a class reunion, you're going to have music. I mean, I remember my wedding. I don't know about you folks, but it got loud, and we had a really great time, and we had a band. And everybody has a band or a DJ. So it's impossible to not introduce, loud music, which is a per se violation of our own code. Memorandum of law goes on to talk about how Connecticut courts have made decisions in favor of greatly restricting special use permits in residential districts that are also part of a historic district. So you have to be really, really careful when you're looking at this. I would ask with respect to the photographs that I brought, when you are talking about the buildings, that you ask the applicant to clean up their property, you know, I don't think that's being unfair at all. I don't have any problems at all with their buildings going up, if it's approved by inland wetlands and everyone else, but I do think that we cannot approve any modification which will allow noise-making for-profit commercial operations and activities and uses. I think the special use permit needs to remain as is. Thank you.
Do you have a response to?
Yes, I do. The Guilford Fairgrounds is not part of the historic district, just to let you know. It was eliminated from being in the historic district. I will mention that. And anybody can look that up at Town Hall if they'd like. As far as the horse trailer and that, those are used for events. All our parking lot, rope, stakes, signs, everything are contained in that yellow horse trailer. And it has been, the stuff that's been in it has been utilized for Lobster Fest and other events down there, okay? The flatbed trailer, that is utilized to put out the blue barrels along Lover's Lane for safety factor. The guys will load the barrels on, they put water in the barrels and bring them down on Lover's Lane to set up that and rope off, and also to put out the garbage cans during the fair and other events that are there. The backhoe, I know it's back there. It was running. I don't know what the status of the running is right now, but it was an item that was donated to the Ag Society because from time to time, we need to move things around during fair time or whatever have you. Okay, so I'm just explaining what those items are there for. As far as music from a wedding or whatever, that is one of the reasons we had to enclose that one building in, was to help prevent sound from spewing out the back towards the property owners. It would then force the music sound to go to the center of the fairgrounds. That was one of the conditions that we had to meet, and we did meet that. Okay? The other thing is, what is the difference between a DJ playing music in that building than the Lobster Fest with their bands, the Earth Day with their bands, or any of those that are nonprofits? But I don't see a difference as far as the loudness of the music. Okay? And I also said that, and I think George had mentioned too, that there is a noise ordinance. So if there is some issue, it would be taken up, the police would be called, the police would go there and investigate it. So I think that there are things in place that would, as far as I'm concerned, police the situation, so to speak, as well as things that we would want or not want someone renting the grounds to do for a wedding or a class reunion. And adding 3 more events to what we already have, and I don't know. I'm having a hard time understanding why anyone would be against that.
Barbara, I have a question. I know they're going to be discussing the buildings later on and so forth, but since it was brought up, a question for you, that equipment and stuff, it's how close is that to your property? And I would imagine you see it more in the winter.
I see it clearly all winter long once the leaves are stripped from the trees.
Right.
And it's, some of it is right on my property line.
Okay.
Or very near.
And as part of your building proposal to store some of that stuff, and so that's part of the whole plan for the additional buildings?
And it does, and it will help actually, because Right now, we have to move, jockey things around because the tents have to come down. It'll allow us to keep some of the stuff we have to jockey around within the buildings and also have room to put other things in there too. I mean, obviously, the open pavilions, it's, you know, you can park some stuff under it, but.
So, Ms. Mack?
Kathy Mack, 212 Whitfield Street. I also am a supporter of the Guilford Fair and their agricultural tradition. And, but I still respectfully request that their application be denied. And the reason is, number of events is not what's important. The number of noisy events are what's important. If there are 12 events that are not noisy, that's great. But we have the fair, we just got this list today, so it wasn't part of the original application. So my comments don't cover this, but I'm just speaking now because I've just read it. And I hope to discuss it next in August 1st when we have that opportunity to read it. But anyway, what's important is how much the neighborhood is aggravated by the noise. And George Kroll just had a wedding for his daughter, and he had it in his barn, and the cops got 3 calls. And my property line, and the problem is the barn is right next to the bathroom, which is 30 feet from our property line. And and what happened is I was out enjoying my yard, and there was a band in the barn, and you could hear it clearly. So these barns, which are not insulated, are not protection. And not only could I hear it, but Pete could hear it, and the other Pete. So, and the thing is, if you have a limited number of loud events, something like 4 or 5, aside from the fair, and you make those events big so that you can make some money, but you are limited to the number because you are aggravating particularly your Whitfield Street neighbors. That would make sense, to have larger events rather than small weddings. It doesn't matter if the wedding is 50 people or 100 people, they get $200 or it's the amount that they receive is not equal to the amount of the nuisance value. So as a good neighbor, if your neighbor came and said to you, look, we're gonna have this barn, and it's not gonna be soundproof, and we're gonna have weddings whenever people come and ask, and we can have 19 of them, or we could have less of them because we're gonna do some other big things, but we're gonna have 19 potentially noisy events. And you look at the number of weekends, that's a lot of weekends, summer weekends, hurt by noise. And that, no one would sign up for that. No one would sign up for that. So, but now I will get back to my, and then one other point, just based on the past conversation, was that the front of the fairgrounds looks beautiful. It really does. It always looks beautiful. But we unfortunately see in the winter the back of the fairgrounds. And we have requested a fence, but have never received it, despite the fact that now we're going to, we had the Renaissance Festival, we have a lot more usage, so a lot more. But in the winter, you can see right through to the bathrooms. And behind the bathrooms, because it's not visible from the front, that's where they place also all those blue barrels that...
Garbage barrels.
And if you could, Barbara, put those into one of the barns that are covered, or put them in a fenced area, because to look at these garbage barrels all winter is not pleasant, so.
I didn't, anyhow, I'm not going to argue with anyone, but I know where your house is located, and I know where all that stuff is located. And there's, okay, when the trees lose their leaves, we can see clearly over, but there is a lot of brush and everything else. And I could probably say that a couple of those pictures, someone was on the property taking the picture.
Yeah, but they were on the property, but that property is also our property, and the corner of the fence corner is covered. So the cement fence corner, because at one point we could still see it, and now we can't. But anyway, the blue garbage cans are a different issue, just of being in a neighborhood and being in a residential neighborhood. We would request that, and if they can't put it in a barn, then have some type of fencing for their garbage cans. But now the reason I am against this new change is that I believe it basically, in effect, eliminates all restrictions. There are no restrictions on them now. There are absolutely none. They can have weddings, they can have reunions, they can have races, they can have bands, they can have, perhaps not bands, but if the band is part of a wedding or a part of a race or part of a, there are no restrictions. And the one restriction we had that we were very, very happy to have was the restriction against weddings. Because the Renaissance Festival was nothing. They did not have mics. They did not have loud. They had instruments, but they weren't amplified. And even without having amplification, it disturbed many in the neighborhood. But with amplification, it is tremendous. So the object of not allowing weddings is so key. If you look up at the Dudley Farm, they say weddings are only allowed within the building, and that building has insulation, and there are people. It's not right next to quarter-acre zoning, which is what Whitfield Street has. Quarter-acre zoning. The town plan has decided this is where people should live. This is where we want people. We want people there because the train stations are there. So we want them to be encouraged to take transportation. So we're going to have the people live in the downtown area, encourage them to live there, give smaller plots and allow more density. But that means you have to be careful of the other problems. And if you want to keep it residential, you have to make sure that you keep it pleasant for families to live there. And so now I will just read this. The current special permit from 1989 was amended in 2016. The pertinent language, and I just want to use it again, it states, uses of this property shall be limited to agricultural fairs, craft shows, auto shows, and similar activities of a non-profit nature. Now, Charlie Rogers lived in Pete's house, my old house, and he was on the zoning board. When they were drafting this regulation, they were using the events that were happening at that time. It was not a huge area for festivals, for weddings, for these types of events, because it was a neighborhood and people were living there. And now the one small little thing that we have, that you cannot allow weddings and well, any of these nonprofit things, but basically weddings and reunions is being taken away. So they basically can do everything there. And they don't have any, so what we would like to do is come back, we would like to limit the loud events. So there's a limit for the loud events. There's a special limit for those, and then they can have other events that aren't loud. But what we're looking at here is nuisance to both the neighbors and to the downtown historic district. The first protection is that it requires all renters to be nonprofit organizations. This means no weddings. As everyone remembers, weddings are a once-in-a-life event, and everyone wants a great party, including loud music and dancing. This is the kind of use the permit does not allow. Also, it does not allow for music festivals and for such events as the Renaissance Fair. We are a neighborhood. Imagine how you would feel if your neighbor said to you, "Sorry, but we are having weddings every third Saturday during the months of July, August, and September." Or, "We will be having one wedding and a 5-day jazz festival. If it gets too loud, just call the police." That's not an option. That does not solve the problem. If you yourself have to be the enforcement agency, the zoning code isn't working. So we don't want to be the one who every night calls and says, "The police," the damage has already occurred. The damage has already occurred. So we have to be protected from the noise by having clear numbers of events that can be noisy. And keeping weddings, which are some of the most nuisance, people get drunk, people are loud, not have those in a fairground. It has nothing to do with dog shows and horse shows and craft shows. The type of things that we would like to see are craft shows or are events which include the community but are not disruptive of the neighborhood. Thank you.
I just want to make one other mention of something that was said earlier about property values. The property values have not been affected by the fairgrounds. Matter of fact, property values downtown have gone up from what they used to be. You also have another venue that is in a residential area where they hold weddings, they hold reunions, they hold benefits and everything, and that would be the Knights of Columbus. And they are in a residential zone. It's a building, but believe me, I know, I've been to some of them, you can hear it clear as day outside, okay? Any concert on the green, you can hear it clear as day down the fairgrounds. The trains, the announcing of the trains, that is loud and clear. I know my grandmother, I lived right next to the railroad tracks, so I know what that is all about. And for people who don't know, again, I've lived here all my life. I know what events have been on those fairgrounds since the Ag Society owned those fairgrounds. They have had firemen musters, they've had drum corps musters, they've had all kinds of events down there since I was a little kid. So it's nothing new with events being held at the fairgrounds. And honestly, we had weddings down there before. Nobody ever complained. Nobody. Nobody in the neighborhood ever complained. No police ever showed up, no nothing. Okay? That was, I can't tell you how many years ago now, but they did have them. We had a class reunion down there on a Sunday with all family, kids, everything. No problem at all. I think that this is being taken beyond the step that it really needs to be taken, to be honest with you. I think that there can be certain things put into place, whether numbers or whatever have you, of, okay, you can only have 2 weddings or 2 weddings, 2 reunions, whatever. I think there are things that can be put into place to allow this. We are not bad neighbors. We do try to accommodate a lot of what the community is looking for. We don't have to, but we do because we want to be part of the community. And as I said, everybody's a volunteer there, so money doesn't grow on trees, and I'm sure everybody understands that.
Sir?
My name is Peter Flug. I live at 158 Whitfield Street, and I also own 188 and 186 Whitfield Streets. They're for sale, so I have a lot at stake in this matter. Does everybody here know what a NIMBY is? It was used earlier. It's not in my backyard. For years, I've been in her position in my other job in Virginia. Now, I am not, NIMBY is not used as literally in your backyard, but here tonight, us four, it is literally our backyard that we're talking about. My property abuts your property. Then in the future, suggestions to come out and call people on NIMBY, even though it wasn't your writing, it was somebody called Nancy.
Yeah,
But
it wasn't
she's,
anybody
you
with
know,
us.
I've been here for a whopping 36 months. Yeah, I'm a newcomer, but it doesn't mean I'm not a property owner. I don't want to repeat, I have a lot of notes here, but I don't want to repeat what my other neighbors have said, but to throw out the noise ordinance is it's only quasi-effective. Noise ordinance deals with decibel level. It doesn't deal with nuisance. An example would be if you have weddings, and I know you're not trying to do weddings every weekend, but say you did, you're going to have the same songs, the same DJs playing. So an example would be, do you want to every Saturday come out and hear It's Raining Men, We Are Family, The Electric Slide? What if we got on repeat and you hit Electric Slide 7 times in a row? Would that be a nuisance? It's not covered by the sound ordinance. My biggest problem, once again, I'm going to make it short. I don't want to cover the same territory. My biggest problem is that what we're asking for here is that for you folks to decide what is appropriate and to give that up and give it to Barbara. That scares me. That's all I have to say.
You got a lot to cover. Anybody else have any other?
My name's Pat Lead. I'm at 10 Horseshoe Road. I didn't even know this was on the agenda tonight. I'm here for another reason, but I just had to speak. My husband Larry was the treasurer for the Ag Society for 15 years. I think everybody that moved in on Whitfield Street kind of knew the fairgrounds was there when they moved in. It's kind of like moving next to an airport and then complaining about the noise. The Ag Society has been very responsible over the past few years. Ever since they've owned the property. And it is private property, just like your homes are private property. And they have been good neighbors, I would say. If you go back to 1989, I don't think your carriage house was probably a home at that point. It probably was that, a carriage house. So I don't think you can reference that and say the fairground didn't have the same activities back then that it does now. Times change, things change. I don't think adding 3 more events a year is unreasonable. There is sound ordinance. There have common sense practices in place. I really think what you're doing is wrong. This community was built on agriculture. The Guilford Fair struggles to make ends meet. And if they need to bring in more revenue with using their property to bring in that revenue, by upping the events by 3 events a year, are you all supporting the Ag Society? Would you like them to have to sell that property and put up condominiums or something? to a developer, everybody says they cherish this open space downtown, but yet nobody wants to emotionally support them, certainly not financially support them. So saying, oh, it's great having the fairgrounds, I support the Guilford Fair, there's more to it than just going to the Guilford Fair. As far as the winter when the leaves are off the trees and seeing their backyard, I see my neighbor's crap in the yard during the winter too. So I put up a row of arborvitae trees. Okay, well, good. In the winter, there's no cover with leaves. You see stuff that you don't see in the summer. That's just it. As far as noise, if you don't want any noise from anywhere, go live in North Guilford. You move downtown. There's a certain trade-off that goes along with that. There's activities on the green, summer concerts every Sunday night. They're talking about a 10 p.m. cutoff. I don't get it. I really, truly don't get it. I think you're being unreasonable.
I have a question for you. I'm not against this stuff. I'm like all these other folks here. We really love the Guilford Fair. Hold on. What happens when Barbara retires?
Excuse me.
This is not.
Excuse me, take your debate somewhere else.
This is not an open debate.
Okay.
Peter, you got a tape to change?
45 minutes to go.
Okay. Quickly, because we got another.
Understood. I just would like to be very clear. So I did move downtown knowing what was there. We're not talking about what was there. We're talking about what they're asking to do in the future, which is materially different. Now, we've talked about violations. Weddings were a violation. As a matter of fact, if you read the 89 special permit, the fact that there's trailers and stuff on the property that's out, that was a condition of the 89 special permit to remove that stuff. So the violations continue. Now, we didn't call when there were weddings. We heard them. Why? We were being a good neighbor. It's one weekend. It wasn't a big deal. If it's 10 weekends, if it's 4 weekends, if it takes away from me having a picnic in my backyard because there's a potential for a commercial operation operating next door that's in a building that had walls built, but they're metal walls. I don't know if you guys know sound, but sound refracts off of metal. Yes, it's going into the fairgrounds, but also refracting back to us. It's not an insulated building like up at Dudley Farms. So I don't know what the fairground needs to support their facilities. I don't know how much they get to rent it for a wedding. I don't think anybody's ever asked. If someone asked, we need 3 more events, it's $1,000. I'm sure the neighbors would say, holy cow, are you kidding me? To not have nuisance, I'll write a check every day of the week. So no one's ever asked me. So just responding to your comments specifically and understanding how a business runs, that this is not a business. This is a not-for-profit that's operating on a piece of property in a residential neighborhood.
They still have to pay bills.
They sure do, and they have the ability to have 17 events. We're asking for 3 more events. That's what they're saying. But they're asking to remove all of the restrictions that protect all of the neighbors by doing that. That was it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Because we've got a couple of big ones on the agenda. So can we?
August
somebody
1st.
want to make a
Question
motion?
is
Any second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, just for clarification, that's for the scheduling of events, not the sheds.
It's really both, but
We can't,
As long as wetlands will,
yes,
okay.
right.
Peter, how much time do you say we had?
about 35 minutes.
Okay. Next on the agenda is proposed amendment to the zoning code regarding elimination of the mandatory second public hearings. This is the first hearing for such. If anybody wants to, I'm going to have George do the presentation first.
By way of a little bit of background, as you know, the commission operates its processes pursuant to Connecticut law. Connecticut law requires public hearings for certain types of applications. Specific to our discussion right now, public hearings are required for special permit applications and they're also required for amendments to the zoning code. Under Connecticut law, when the commission receives an application that requires a public hearing, special permit, or petition to change the zoning code, you have to hold a public hearing within 65 days of receiving the application, and you have to close the public hearing within 35 days of commencing the public hearing, unless the applicant grants an extension. The applicant grants an extension of up to 65 days. That's what the Connecticut law specifies with regard to the practice and the conducting of public hearings. Connecticut law does not specifically authorize an amendment that you approved a number of years ago, which requires a second date for all public hearings pursuant either to special permit applications or petitions to amend the zoning code. Under your current regulations, section 273-99, special permit procedures, and also under 273-109 amendments, the language of the regulation reads, the commission shall continue the required public hearing to a subsequent date in order that the public has a full opportunity to comment on any proposal or application. So when you have a public hearing under these two sets of circumstances, under your current law, you have to continue that public hearing to a subsequent date. That public hearing has to be within that 35-day window, or it can extend beyond the 35 days with the consent of the applicant, only with the consent of the applicant. The Commission has discussed over the last several years, since September 2016, when this amendment was adopted, requiring a continuation of a public hearing. The Commission has discussed quite a number of times applications, or made note of applications where it was apparent that a second public hearing was a burden on the applicant. I think we saw one tonight, the Yarrow special permit, where there was little or no reason to require the public hearing to be continued to a subsequent date. You have in your packet, I think, a summary of special permits that have been issued since October of 2015, which note the various types of applications that have been subject to this requirement. The Commission, in its wisdom, suggested that the Zoning Committee take a look at this regulation and propose for consideration an amendment to it to eliminate the mandatory continuation requirement for these types of public hearings. The Zoning Committee did not meet in a authorized quorum. The Zoning Committee met, Chairman Johnson and Commissioner Hirschman met, discussed with me drafting proposed amendment to the regulation for the Commission's consideration, and that's what you have before you right now. Actually, based on discussions that I've had with Chairman Johnson, I'd like to review with you two alternative versions of how the current regulation might be modified. I think you have in front of you a piece of paper that's labeled Draft July 11, 2018, Proposed Amendment regarding elimination of mandatory continuation of public hearings. You all have that. There are two alternative versions of this. The first version of this would eliminate completely the mandatory provision for a continuation of the public hearing, substitute the language that's shown in red, I believe in the copy that you have in front of you, which would read, in the case of special permits, the Commission may continue the required public hearing to a subsequent date in order that the public has a full opportunity to comment on any proposal or application. The may is a change from the current language, which says shall. And then there's another sentence added to that proposed amendment, In considering a continuation of the public hearing, the commission shall consider the complexity of the application, the interest of the public in the application, and/or the need for more information about the application. This proposed amendment would authorize you, not that the zoning code requires such authorization, because under current Connecticut law, you can continue a public hearing to as many subsequent dates as you want to, as long as it's within those time frames, those time limits established by Connecticut law, 35 days or up to an additional 65 days with the consent of the applicant. So this first set of proposed changes, in the case of 27399, and also in the case of 273-109, which is the text amendments, this regulation eliminates the mandatory and restates what Connecticut law authorizes today, and that is you can continue any public hearing you wish to continue based on your feeling that it's necessary within the limits of Connecticut law. So that's the first alternative way of addressing the issue of perceived excessive mandatory continuation requirement. The second alternative is shown also on this piece of paper. The second alternative substitutes some additional language. It continues the shall requirement, as you see in the second sentence. The commission shall continue the required public hearing to a subsequent date or dates in order that the public has a full opportunity to comment on any proposal or application. And then goes on to say the commission may waive the requirement of a continued public hearing by a vote of 3/4 of the members and with the finding that the application has been fully vetted with one public hearing. So this is a variation on the first proposal. First proposal says you may continue the public hearing should you desire to, and the second alternative says that you have to have a public hearing, you have to continue the public hearing, but it gives you the opportunity to waive that requirement upon a 3/4 vote of the members present at the time of consideration of the public hearing. And then that same language obtains to the text amendment. You can, in this alternative proposal, you have to have a second public hearing. You have to continue the public hearing, but you can waive that requirement with a 3/4 vote. So that's the alternative proposals that are on the table. You have a number of letters, I think, that have been submitted with regard to this. Some of the people authoring these letters are here. They may wish to read their own comments. I'm not sure how you want to handle that, Mr. Chairman. There's an email from Patricia Kleindienst. There's another email from Lori Kramer. I don't know whether she's here or not. And there's also a comment from an email from Matt Hoey, the first selectman, who is also addressing you on this subject.
I think what Matt says is to the 3/4 vote to change this.
He says, and I'll read it, this is an email to me dated today. For what it's worth, my preference is the use of the 3/4 majority vote to dispense with the second hearing. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Just to be clear, the 3/4 vote is at the time of the first hearing to determine whether a second hearing is necessary.
Right. Again, technically.
So we are not discontinuing the possibility of a second hearing.
No, it's actually, and I've used this word, I've expressed it this way as well. It's not actually a second public hearing. It's a mandatory continuation of the public hearing to a second date. Under the 3/4 alternative, that mandatory requirement would remain, but you could waive it with a 3/4 vote at the time of the first public hearing.
So what you're saying is when we go into deliberations, if we could make a motion if 3/4 of the board.
Well, the way it would work practically is, as tonight, you had a requirement for go to a second public hearing with the Ag Society application. You voted to continue the public hearing to August 1st. Rather than doing that, you could either, that would be required under this alternative number 2, unless you voted with a 3/4 majority to not continue the public
In
hearing.
which case, we would vote on the special permit.
You would
that
then
night.
vote on the
Right.
special permit. I mean, you don't have to vote that, you would vote on it just like you would any other application. You could vote on it that night. You don't really have to do that.
But you would not continue to.
You wouldn't continue the public hearing. The public hearing would end at that moment.
Haven't we had our discretion, because I've known we've taken things to 3 and sometimes 4.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing to prohibit you from going to multiple meetings, continuations.
First alternative would be that if we felt like the case needed to be continued, then we would have the authority to do that under your first part, but we wouldn't be required.
You would not be required to. You have the authority. That authority is already in Connecticut law. This really merely restates what that authority is. It also elaborates the reasons why you might do that. Again, keeping in mind that those time limits are obligatory. You cannot exceed those time limits. You must conclude the public hearing within 35 days of commencing it, unless the applicant grants an extension, and they can grant up to 35 days. So it's quite common where, you know, a complex application, let's take, for example, the U-Haul application, where it was clear there were lots of unanswered questions, lots of ambiguities, lots of need to continue the public hearing. Under the old regime, before we went to the mandatory, you would vote to continue the public hearing. And you might even vote the public hearing to be continued beyond that 35 days, because the applicant would know that if he didn't consent to that, you would feel like you didn't have enough information to vote, and you would probably vote no. So it'd be in the interest of the applicant to grant that continuation, although the maximum that can be granted is 65 days. So the maximum that can occur would be the 35 days required from commencing the hearing, plus another 65 days. That's the most you could continue the public hearing. And you can continue it to multiple dates, depending on your schedule and at your discretion.
So given this scorecard of what we have done, or how many mandatory second hearings we've had for whatever projects it is.
The one that is second after the "or," and the second one down here is saying that we can, if everything's been vetted out, that we can go, we don't have to have a second hearing. We'll be able to decide right that night.
Yes.
That's basically the difference of what we have now, or we automatically do.
Yes, right.
So that's the bottom line of all this talking.
Well, there's two alternatives. One is the second alternative requires that 3/4 of you agree to not continue the hearing, to end it at the first meeting, at the first hearing.
That's the safe way to go. We have a choice.
Anybody else for George on the board?
Well, are either of the two people, emails that George mentioned, are either of those two people in attendance tonight? Okay. Are you the Patricia Kleindist? Okay. Should we read into the record the other email?
If they're here, well, I'll prefer to have them read it.
Lori Kramer wrote me that she's taken ill and she couldn't come.
You got Lori Kramer's letter?
I think we have her email.
Yes, you do.
I'll read it. Ironically, I can't attend tonight's public meeting due to a temporary health issue, but I plan to be at the second meeting. Thankfully, there still is one. My husband and I are adamantly opposed to your motion to eliminate the second public meeting. Presumably, this is to make your lives easier. Let me just share that your poor decisions in the distant and recent past have caused us and many other citizens to question if we even want to live here anymore.
Could you slow down, please, and articulate? No, I can.
Sure.
More articulate. Maybe start over.
Sure.
Please.
Ironically, I can't attend tonight's public meeting due to a temporary health issue, but I plan to be at the second meeting. Thankfully, there still is one. My husband and I are adamantly opposed to your motion to eliminate the second public meeting. Presumably, this is to make your lives easier. Let me just share that your poor decisions in the distant and recent past have caused us and many other citizens to question if we even want to live here anymore. Ever grateful that we dodged a bullet with the propane facility on Route 1 and the SGT Nutmeg trails that would have ruined neighborhoods, we weren't so lucky with U-Haul. Not coming up with enough good reasons to vote against this proposal wasn't an intelligent, prudent reason to vote for it. Those voting for it will have it on their conscience forever. Yes, we are angry. We are in a neighborhood you did not even acknowledge in your process. You are stewards of the quality of life in this town. If you don't want to hear public opinion, then you should not be on the commission. Relinquish the seat to someone who has the patience and the discernment to make conscientious, intelligent decisions, not just ones to avoid litigation. Lloyd Kramer.
I surmise we have a few people that want to address this issue. I'm going to suggest you line up at the microphone. Pete, how much time do we have, or should we change before this?
Let's change now, I think.
Okay.
Take a brief recess?
Brief recess for 5 minutes?
Yeah. Let's have
No business to be conducted.
I'm lining up.
Hold on a second. Hold on the line up for 1 second. Right? We're back. No, we have not conducted any business since we changed the disc over. As I mentioned before, I was going to have line up for comments, but first I would like to entertain questions for the board and to the town planner on this amendment. If anyone has any questions about the amendments proposed. Ms. Kleindienst, come to the mic and,
But the mics aren't working.
well, that's only for the TV.
Right. So one suggestion I'd like to make is that there be a mic for the public, because we've all been struggling all night to hear. Some information was given to the members of the commission that was not given to the public. And one of the obvious questions is, if you need to make this amendment based on numbers, we'd like to see the numbers too. So are there enough copies of what Mr. Kroll gave you to give to the public, or if we could share them?
Either that are available at the office?
Yeah, we can.
You can have this now if you want.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the board or the town?
Can I make a suggestion? Could
Yes.
somebody read the numbers aloud? There aren't very many of them. It would be helpful for everyone to hear them.
Okay,
Thank you.
do that. Since the 2016 amendment went into effect for mandatory second public hearings, 71 special permits have been issued, 21 accessory apartments, 18 accessory structures, 4 changes in non-conforming use, 5 new homes, 3 changes in a PRD, 16 miscellaneous, and there were 4 controversials. Graziano, Ocean Co., Vazaros for the yurt up in North Guilford, and U-Haul. Any other questions? Planned residential development such as Benton's Knoll, I think that was the one. Okay, all right. Then if there's no further questions, let's line up for comments. Come up to the microphone, state your name and address, and
I am Nona Bloomer, 988 Leeds Island Road in Guilford. The proposal to eliminate the mandatory continuation of public hearings or to leave it to the discretion of the Planning and Zoning Commission brings to mind the possibility of behind-the-scene approval, such as was received by the Shoreline Greenway Trail, SGT, directors from several town hall officials. It was only by the happenstance of having a proposed SGT segment erroneously presented to Planning and Zoning before passing through the Board of Selectmen that the public was informed that the SGT directors had been collaborating on that segment with town hall officials for 3 years, to the point where the engineering drawings were already in a preliminary planning and designing phase. Our current first selectman has emphasized his support of transparency in governance and town affairs. Let's not approve a move that has the potential of obscuring critical information governing a planned proposal, even as it would limit the opportunity for public response. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Howard. I live at 89 Valley Shore Drive. You know, here it is after 9:15. We've been here for 2 hours. We've used up a piece of tape. Let me tell you, having been a chairman of a planning and zoning board, having been a selectman, I really appreciate the work you guys put in. And even more, that town employees come in late at night and go home even more exhausted than they were at 5. But I don't think that this is a good idea. I recognize that there's some efficiency of it. I don't think it's a good idea, though, and tonight has been a provision for 2 good examples of this. The young couple that came in with an uncontested item, yeah, it did require that they come back another month, but I don't think it caused them any harm. But with respect to the fairground question, I should imagine that we heard objections tonight that from many people that none of us anticipated. And I expect that there will be more at the next hearing, again, that none of us anticipated. And that's, I think, why the mandatory second hearing is indeed beneficial. You know, we would just hate to have any thought that people in town might have, as Nona Bloomer just said, that there might be something left incomplete and not properly done because something were rushed. I don't think that should happen. I think that Guilford has been operating at a higher standard than the state requires, and I think it's beneficial if we continue to do so. Thank you, and again, let me tell you how much I appreciate what you're doing.
My name is Patricia Kleindienst. I live at 295 Clabber Hill Road in Guilford. Can everyone hear me? Thank you. I have a question about procedure. Since I did send you all a letter, should I read that into the record now before I make my comment? Yes. Okay, thank you. This was my email to Philip Johnson, the chair of P&Z, who isn't with us this evening. And the subject line was, "Please vote to protect the public's right to know." Dear Mr. Johnson, I write to share my letter to the editor of the New Haven Register about the proposed amendment that would eliminate the mandatory second hearing for the applications before Planning and Zoning. The first of 2 meetings to discuss this proposed change is tonight, as you know. Many of us who will attend are seriously concerned about what appears to be an attempt to roll back the zoning code that was intended to offer the public, quote, the full opportunity to participate, including fact-checking and time to formulate reasoned opinions to bring to P&Z commissioners before you vote. As we have learned in the past few years, it is hard and time-consuming work to check facts. We did it for the SGT, and we've tried to do it and done it after the fact of U-Haul. We have seen how a bad proposal can pass because the true facts were not presented to the town officials with the power to approve or deny, or to the public, whose lives will be affected by the outcome of planning and zoning votes. We are as concerned that you, the commissioners, will not have adequate time to check facts, to ask for the details of complex plans in order to make an informed vote if there is only one public hearing. As we are concerned that the public's ability to participate fully is now going to be curtailed. Why go backwards now? Who is served by such a change? Is this in the public's best interest? We hope you will hear us when we ask for more transparency, not less, for more time and opportunity for serious fact-checking and public input, not less. We want a more participatory, democratic process, and we hope that you do too. So that was my email to the commission before tonight. But I looked at, Mr. Johnson was courteous enough to send me a draft of the amendment before the meeting so I could look at it. And I want to point out some crucial problems with the way it was presented. Mr. Kroll presented 2 alternatives. The first is the ability for you to vote that you may continue to a second hearing, or you may waive a second hearing. And the criteria for waiving the second hearing would be the complexity of the application, the interest of the public, and/or the need for more information about the application. One of the questions I'd like to ask each of you to consider and answer for us is, how on earth are you going to gauge public interest in an application if the public doesn't know about it? Since you only put little tiny legal notices in the newspaper, and you do not, as we learned tonight, make an effort to disseminate information before a meeting, the public has to know there's something pending and then go to town hall to learn about it. How do you gauge public interest? Do you wait to see who shows up at the first meeting? The first meeting is often the only meeting when people learn how controversial and dangerous a proposal is, and then word gets out to the public who show up for the second meeting. If you decide at the first meeting that only 5 people show up, then there's not enough interest, you waive the second meeting, and there might be 50 to 150 people who would have shown up for that second meeting. I can guarantee it, certainly when it came to U-Haul. So then I want to point out the problem. The first proposal you read offers criteria for waiving that meeting, but it offers nothing about how you vote. The second proposal offers a model for how you vote, and that is the commission may waive the requirement of a continued public hearing by a vote of 3/4 of the members, and with a finding that the application has been fully vetted with one public hearing. I think the only way you can ask us to seriously consider this amendment is if you combine the two, and you present us with something that both offers us the criteria for determining whether or not another meeting is necessary, and a process by which a supermajority of 3/4 is required to waive that meeting. I would say that's the minimum the public needs and deserves to consider this amendment. I think anything short of that is a rollback of the public's right to know, and I think the public will come to the second meeting and oppose it. I did, in fact, put together a revision of those two to suggest to you how it might work, and I hope you'll seriously consider this idea of putting the two together. But since I was also very struck by what happened with the 2 hearings tonight, that young couple was delighted. They were pleasant. I've been to other meetings on behalf of my neighbors and other people here when I was asked to be for or against what my neighbors were doing, and I heard a lot of different neighbors talking about problems here, and even when we were here for the U-Haul meeting, we heard for other meetings. Most of them are not that difficult. I think what would help us with this set of numbers you gave us is time. How much time did it actually take on those shorter, simpler votes? Was it really that hard? Did people really complain? Who complained? Is it better for you, or is it better for the public that simple applications only have one meeting? Okay, so my argument is that this is a moment to make a positive, important change. And how do we keep this from being a step backward? I think we've also seen some problems already with how things happen at P&Z meetings. Most of us couldn't hear a lot of what was going on. We had to ask more than once, could you please speak up? There's a sense in which it's your meeting, and maybe we get to be part of it. Maybe we get the information. Maybe we even hear what you're saying. I think if you want a more positive, participatory community, then you have to make every effort possible. We have the technology to make things more available. So one of my proposals is, why not post an application, a fully submitted application, on the town website? Have a page on the website where you say, okay, this is what's going to appear before P&Z. Part of what I'm saying here is, we see what you see. There's no difference between what's presented to you and what's presented to us. That is the essence of transparency in government. Right now, that is not the case, unless people know there's something at Town Hall and they have the time and the energy to go and look at it. I don't think that's hard. Some of us would be glad to help with it. There is the technology available. There is the goodwill available. So I think this is a moment to be more creative than you're being, or than this possible amendment proposes. All right, let's see. All right, so the last point I'd like to make is, how do we let you know that more information is needed? It seems to me that the proposal constantly refers only to you and not to us, that you decide whether more information is needed. How do you know whether or not we feel more information is needed? How do we come together on that? If there's one meeting, and that's when we get most of our information, how do we let you know, no, this is not adequate, we have the following questions, we need more information, all right? And my final point, and I want to make this diplomatically. The meeting to vote on the U-Haul was ragged, is the most polite word I could use for it. It was a raggedy meeting. People were outraged, but I want to applaud the fact that they didn't get up and express it. They left peacefully. I think it's quite clear that you did not have all the facts in the U-Haul proposal. I know that. We know that. We didn't get all the facts either, but you voted to approve, and you actually said into the record again and again and again, we don't know A, we don't know B, we don't know C, we don't know D, but we have to vote to approve. Why should I have confidence in this amendment that you're going to know what more information is needed when we just saw you vote yes on U-Haul without all the facts? Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, my name is Kent Bloomer, 988, and again, I would like to thank you people, as you were before, for all the efforts you've made. One effort that I've never seen made here in these meetings, at least the last two, the SGT and the U-Haul, is the presence, either here or somewhere else, of the visual stuff we're talking about. You know, site plans, models. Mr. Crowell said we could go and get a file, but that's kind of paltry. I mean, why aren't the projects, the visual projects, and tonight we talked about buildings that are going on the fairgrounds and other such things, why aren't there drawings of them that are either displayed in a sort of museum setting? Shanghai has a model of the entire city in a public museum that you can go to. We don't have here, as you do in a school or a design office, access to what the stuff is that we're talking about visually and spatially. And I think that it would seem to me that if there was a visual dimension and spatial dimension to what's going on here, the whole process would be easier. I find it very difficult to plow through the conversations as compared to being shown what it is we're discussing. We can talk about music, I mean sound, and we hear the sound, but we don't want the sound. But we're also talking about environmental, spatial, landscape, and architectural issues that remain invisible. So why can't we have a way of presenting that? That's all I'd like to say, and thank you again.
Anyone else?
I wrote up my amendments.
Pardon?
I meant to give this to each of you. You can pass them down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's certain.
Yes, it will be. Any more comment on this proposed amendment? Can I get a motion to move this to our next meeting? August 1st? Anyone, you will have, and we'll talk about it again and deliberate. If anybody wants to speak then again, so be, fine.
Is there a way, excuse me, I
Yep.
apologize. How does one, are there proxy procedures if you're out of the country?
Just, pretty much just, you could write a letter, any communication would be received for the
We
file.
read a letter, and we read it into the record of the meeting.
Second amendment.
All in favor of continuation? Okay, so moved. Good night. Next up, Town of Guilford. Coastal Area Management Project, public water main extension along 13,000 feet of public access and private right-of-ways of the Mulberry Point, Tuttle's Point, and Long Cove Association. Evening, Dennis.
Hello. I'm Dennis Johnson, the Town of Guilford Health Department. This is the water main project you've heard about, I think, for probably the last 15 years. It's at the point now where we're about to go out to, we've gone out to bid for the project, and we're expecting to have the bids open in a couple weeks. But I'll back up and give you a little background on the project. You can all see this map. This is the study area, the project area. We have Indian Cove in this area, Tuttle's Point here, and we have Mulberry Point along this area here, and they're connected by Daniels Avenue. There's also Long Cove Association in this area here. So there's 3 associations which are benefiting from the public water extension. Long Cove, Mulberry Point, and Tuttle's Point. The water main is proposed to extend from Old Sachem's Head Road. You recall there's a water tower in that area. We'll tap into their large 12-inch water line, run the water main through the Fisher easement property about 1,100 feet onto Upper Lower Road, and then down Lower Road. And then down here in Daniel Avenue, we skip onto some private property on an easement to avoid the Indian Cove Association property. And then we cross a little creek, Long Cove Creek, on Daniel Avenue, continue turning southwest along Mulberry Point, servicing all the roads and associations in Mulberry Point, Marshall Avenue, Decatur Avenue. And then we cross Tuttle's Point, on the Tuttle's Point Road, cross a little marsh here into the Tuttle's Point area, and the water main terminates down at this point here. So it's approximately 13,000 feet of water main, 8 and 12-inch water main. It's all installed in the streets. There's one structure, which is going to be an elevated pipe that goes over Daniel Avenue. We had to elevate the pipe because we can't dig underneath that culvert. It's way down into the ground below the water table. So we're going to cross a 40-foot span over the Long Cove Creek. I guess the only other structures that would be present would be fire hydrants, which is a good thing. So the bulk of the work's going to be...
So there are no fire hydrants down there now?
Right.
Yeah.
There's no public water in this area. The reason we have a CAM application is because this is a utility, like a water main, sewer main, gas line that's being installed in a public street. I must say that this is a very highly regulated project. We've had to fill out permits with the Army Corps of Engineers, Connecticut DEP. Where DEP is requiring a general permit, which is a very comprehensive permit for crossing the Daniel Avenue Causeway here, and also the Tuttle's Point. Army Corps of Engineers has jurisdiction in this area also. They're requiring a general permit. DEP is also requiring a structures dredge and fill permit to cross over the Long Cove Creek. So DEP and Army Corps have commented on this project, and we have all the applications completed, and we're waiting for them for their final approvals. We have, I think, 5 easements we've acquired to get this project going, from Fisher property, Long Cove Association, the Rhodes property, Mulberry Point, Tuttle's Point. All these easements have been worked out. It's a long, dragged-out process. There's more than 80% support from residents for the project because of the poor water quality and low yielding water quality. So the environmental concerns, we are going to do all the best practice managements to protect the coastline, the coastal resources. We have stealth fences that would be put up whenever there's crossing or construction within a coastal resource area. One of the crossings that we go through, part of a vernal pool, we have to photograph the pool, the little stream bed before we start construction to get the location of the rocks, and then set the rocks aside, and then dig out the little path for the pipe, and then put the rocks back in place. It's very, very particular on how we cross certain wetland areas. We don't want to harm the wetland or leave any impact. So the project is been many years in the making. We have the funding available through the State Health Department. It's actually a Clean Water Fund passed through the federal government to the state for these types of procedures. There's a subsidy tied into the project as well. And then we have contributions from the Connecticut Water Company as well for the project. That's pretty much in a nutshell, but because it is a utility going through a wetland area, a coastal wetland area, we do need a CAM application for it. And there'll be no structures built other than just the pipe crossing and fire hydrants, basically. So, be glad to answer any questions you may have.
We had this last year before the referendum on this
Right, I think we
whole process.
I think we went to planning and zoning for a certificate of appropriateness.
Appropriateness. I had to read in all the easements and
Yeah.
right-of-ways given.
Yeah.
Any questions from the commissioners?
Of all the residences that will have access to the water mains, how many have agreed to or subscribed to the water service? Do we understand?
Yeah, there's, like I said earlier, there's greater than
80%?
Greater than 80% have committed to it, have actually committed deposits for the water main. How many of those will actually hook up, I'm not certain. But if the water main crosses in front of your property down your street, you will be assessed for it, whether you hook up or not. But that's pretty typical for utility extension. You get paid, you have to pay an assessment for the benefit that you receive.
And then if they wait beyond a certain point, they'll pay, will they pay the same if they
Yeah,
wait a
they'll
year
pay
or
the
two?
same, they'll pay
Okay.
the same assessment as the neighbor who might hook up. They'll pay the same 20-year assessment for it. So it's spread out at a 2% interest over 20 years. So that's how it's a special assessment.
A couple of questions for you. The determination of who would be tapping that water, that was based on, I remember earlier talk about compromised wells, right? So that the northern area of Tuttle's Points, those homes up there don't have a problem with their own wells, so they wouldn't need municipal water, is that right?
We did a water sample survey of wells, I think, a couple years ago, and I think we found more than 80% of the samples we collected had problems with either nitrates or salt or sodium or chloride or bacteria. There are some homeowners who don't have problems with their wells. A neighbor can have a problem, and the next door they don't have a problem. Some people, their wells go dry during the drought in the summer. So yeah, there are people that don't have problems with their wells, but if the water main goes by their property, they will be benefited by the water main, and they will have to pay the assessment.
Right. I guess my question is that northern part, just below Mulberry Point Road there. Yeah, that area is, is that high enough elevation so they don't?
Yeah, there wasn't an interest really in the water main up this far. Generally, these are larger lots. They're further away from the saltwater intrusion problem. So at one time, I think maybe 20 years ago, we had proposed a route going all the way up Mulberry Point Road to 146, but it was extremely expensive because of all the blasting and rock. And there weren't a lot of people that were in favor of it, so we looked for an alternative route. Okay.
You want me to read the Kevin?
Got any other questions?
No.
Okay, just
I'm going to be reading the Kevin McGee letter. Is that right? Yeah, July 17, 2018, Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission, addressed to, from Kevin McGee, Environmental Planner, regarding coastal area management application, Town of Guilford, Mulberry Point Water Main installation. The Town of Guilford is looking to install a water main from Sachem's Head Road to Tuttle's Point Road. The proposed water main construction will involve 2 stream crossings at Long Cove and Tuttle's Point. The installation of the water main will be adjacent to the coastal resources of tidal wetlands, beaches, rocky shorefronts, and coastal bluffs on Lower Road, Daniel Avenue, and Mulberry Point, Tuttle's Point, and Marshall Avenue. The proposed work plan indicates that the section of road that the water main is being installed will be backfilled and paved the same day so that no piles of fill will be left next to the coastal resources. The plans provide for erosion and sedimentation control measures and are designated to have minimal impact to the adjacent coastal resources. The town of Guilford has filed permits with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection and the Army Corps of Engineers for the 2 stream crossings. The Guilford Inland Wetlands Commission, at its July 11, 2018 meeting, approved the regulated activity with conditions for the construction of the water main through an inland wetlands and construction with Inland Wetlands Commission jurisdiction review area. In order to make sure that the coastal resources are protected, I recommend the following conditions of approval. 1, a pre-construction meeting be held with the zoning enforcement officer, environmental planner, and town engineer. 2, weekly status reports be provided to the Inland Wetlands Zoning Enforcement Officer, noting weekly inspection of silt fence and repairs made, work completed for the previous week and work to be completed the next week. 3, Town of Guilford Zoning Enforcement Officer should be notified to inspect the sedimentation and erosion control measures prior to any site work. 4, soil stockpiles shall be contained by silt fencing and/or hay bales. Soil erosion and sedimentation control measures shall be maintained until all site work has been completed. And that completes that. Yeah. Okay.
Any questions from the public? Sir.
Dennis, what happened to Indian Cove? They're not interested?
No, they had a vote not to participate in the project.
Any particular reason, or?
I'm not certain what the reason was.
I have one more technical question for you. Because I used to manage the old Dushkin Publishing building for 12 years, and we had our water main run above ground. What's the size of the water main is what, that you'll have 40 feet above ground? It's
That will be 12-inch insulated pipe.
Oh, it is going to be insulated, yeah.
It'll be 2-foot diameter with a 12-inch pipe on the inside, but insulated material.
And in fact, you probably wouldn't have to worry about freezing conditions anyway, because you're going to have most likely a constant water flow through it.
Yeah, that'll be serving, about 135 homes, so it's going to be flowing, and it'll be insulated as well, so.
I learned a lot about water flow when I had to manage that, so, okay.
Yeah.
You have a town engineer also, I believe.
James
Right there?
Oh, I'm sorry, one more to read. All right, this is to Planning and Zoning Commission from James A. Portley, PE Town Engineer, date July 17, 2018, regarding water main extension, Mulberry Point, Tuttle's Point, and Long Cove. The efforts to extend public water to the shoreline communities go back at least 20 years. Multiple issues dictated pursuit of the efforts, ranging from household wells drying up during summer season to saltwater intrusion to contamination of wells by septic systems on the many undersized residential lots. The project is heartily endorsed so that a significant segment of the town's population can enjoy potable water supply that is too often taken for granted by the rest of the town.
Anybody else? Brian.
I'm Brian McGlone, but I stand here tonight as a resident of 622 Mulberry Point Road and not as the economic development person that some may know me by. First, we want to thank Dennis for the last 3 or 4 years, in particular, for all the work that has gone into this project and all the different things he's had to do and the adjustments he's had to make and everything else. He really has a good handle on this. But I mean, as a homeowner that's impacted by this, will be positively impacted by this, and I just want to reiterate to the public, the monies, there is monies, that, as Dennis said, the public water, Connecticut Water is putting forward, and there's some other grants, but we as the homeowners will share, or a great burden of this. However, through the Connecticut, the monies, we were able to get a low-interest loan that we can amortize over 20 years. So, I mean, the cost to be determined, but it's in the $10,000 to $12,000, $13,000 range per homeowner that will be paid over 20 years. But only the homeowners in these neighborhoods, not any other persons in Guilford. And then the hookup cost is separate from that. But I mean, we get the benefit of fresh water. Frankly, my own home, I have great water pressure. We don't drink it. It's a little minerally. We have a water conditioner and softener, but it still really doesn't do. So our drinking water, we use Poland Springs water. I pay for Poland Springs water. I pay for the chemicals for my water conditioner. I average about $400 a year in little plumbing leaks that through corrosion and rust. With the fire hydrants, my insurance on my home is going to go down. We're going to get repaved, new paved roads and reshaped in this neighborhood to almost bring it back to new. So, I mean, there's a lot of benefits beyond just the water. So we certainly hope everybody here is going to endorse this project and support it. And believe me, it's been looked at from a million different reasons. And again, as the neighbors that are there, we couldn't thank Dennis in particular. Others that have been involved, but Dennis has been a real champion over the last few years in particular to get this thing to where we're at. So thank you very much, and hope we have your support.
Sue Robbins, 798 Mulberry Point Road. I just want to echo what Brian said. He gave you all the facts about why and how and the benefits that we're all anxiously waiting for. But I want to take this opportunity to also support Dennis as well as the rest of the town that have worked tirelessly for us. But I'd also like to remind the board that we had a real mandate from the generous residents that came out and voted on our referendum last May 31st. Because of the charter, this project needed to go to town-wide referendum, and we had support from people in North Guilford and every district. I think had 1,004 for and only 122 against. So we had a real mandate and support from our town residents, and we thank them greatly for that, because we wouldn't be here today asking for your permission to take this one last step without them. But major thanks goes to Dennis. He has a tough job day to day, but on top of doing that job, he has put this program together, and I can attest that he has spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours working with the state and all the agencies that have required the enormous amount of dotted I's and crossed T's to get the program to this point. So we thank you, Dennis, and publicly wanted to take that opportunity, and we thank the board for your continued support.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Make a motion to close the public.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. George, I got one question on the revised agenda. Deliberation of public hearing items and then Claremont remodeling?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. He left.
He left, so we
Yeah,
can just
so-
bypass that. Okay, can I have a motion to approve the revised agenda?
Make a motion.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Can I get a motion on Yarrow? You want to read that?
Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a special permit application for Nathaniel Tucker Yarrow for an accessory apartment at 165 Dromara Road, map 66, lot 29, as shown on an application dated 4/7/2018. This application is approved with the following conditions: that prior to the occupancy of the apartment, a new code-sized septic system be installed to serve the proposed apartment and existing house. This application is approved based on a finding that it conforms with the zoning code. The special permit is effective on July 27, 2018, and upon filing with the town clerk.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, based on the one condition, that seems fine to me, that as long as the septic system is up to code prior to occupancy, that everything seemed fine otherwise.
Anybody else? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Sean, you want the water company?
I'd like to make another motion.
Oh, all right.
Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a coastal area management application for the town of Guilford for a public water main extension in the Mulberry Point, Tuttle's Point, and Long Cove neighborhoods, as shown on an application dated 5/30/2018, and Town of Guilford, Connecticut water main extension, March 2018, prepared by Wright Pierce. This application is approved based upon the finding that it conforms with the zoning code and is consistent with the coastal management policies of the state of Connecticut.
With Kevin, note Kevin's conditions.
I'd like to strike that and add one condition that all of the conditions recommended by Kevin McGee, the environmental planner, would be added as a condition to this proposal.
Any second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. Call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Dennis, good job. So Claremont remodeling. Next is subdivision for Larry Lupone's. Oh, we are going to do Claremont.
Yeah, Claremont has, this has been a special permit application. You've had your two public hearings, and you had closed the public hearing. At the last public hearing, it was brought to the attention of our office that there was an accessory apartment in the property that did not have a permit, and so we held off on that, on voting prior to the applicant making an application for a special permit to legalize that accessory apartment. Got a little delayed. They had to design an engineered septic plan, which everything, we have a complete application now that you will end up, I believe it's on your agenda to receive tonight and set public hearing. So the conditions that were a problem have been resolved with that application, so we can act on this one now.
Okay.
Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a special permit for an accessory structure of over 750 square feet for Claremont remodeling of 541 Sawmill Road, map 85, lot 65, shown on application plans dated 3/27/18. This application is approved with the following conditions. The application is approved based upon the finding that it conforms with a zoning code and will have no adverse impact on the neighborhood properties. The special permit is effective on July 27, 2018, upon filing with the town clerk.
Second? Discussion? I think Aaron took care of all our,
The resident came and talked about it, had a discussion with the, if I remember correctly, had a discussion with the homeowner, and they've worked out any questions that they had.
so, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. Now we're into subdivisions. Eric?
Good evening, Eric Anderson, Anderson Engineering and Surveying Associates, 1054 Boston Post Road here in Guilford. This property is a proposed 4-lot subdivision. It is just south of street number 500 on Durham Road, Route 77. All of the lots conform to the lot area, the square, and the other zoning requirements. We have tested all the soils out here and have identified good locations for houses and septic systems and wells. We have instead of putting out a driveway on Route 77 for each lot, we have 2 driveways, each one serving 2 lots. We have area along the West River that we have designated to be a conservation easement, and this primarily was an open field, and up until the last couple of years had been regularly mowed. But there is a tree line along here right near the wetlands line, and the conservation easement encompasses the entire wooded area along the West River. We have been to the Inland Wetlands Agency and received their positive feedback to your commission for this project. They would like to have these lots come back to them for their approval, even though we don't need to regulate activities for anything that we're doing here. Because of the proximity of the West River, they will just want to see how we're going to be grading these in here.
So the purple lines in your drawings are the proposed grading or
the purple line are the proposed silt fence.
Oh, during construction.
During construction, just downslope from the septic systems. The orange line is the wetlands line, and the yellow line here is the center of the river, which is the property line. So without taking any...
So is there a street that runs off of Durham Road there?
Now, this is Durham Road here. We have one driveway that comes in that serves lot number 2 and extends back and serves lot number 1. Then there's one common curb cut down here to serve lots 3 and 4.
So you're basically making only 2 curb cuts.
Right.
That's correct.
And so 500 Durham Road, help me out, where?
This is 500 Durham Road right here. And this being a vacant lot, it never received a street number. So as soon as these become approved lots, then it will receive street numbers for these lots.
I'm just trying to place it on Durham Road, I'm just trying to figure out where.
Okay, if you're familiar with where Prospect Street goes off to the right,
Yeah.
you go up and as you start to make a turn, there's an open field on the left-hand side, and a couple of doors up is where Lee Whiteman lives.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So it's the open field just a couple of houses south of Lee Whiteman's.
Is it her land?
Excuse me?
Is it Lee's land?
No, her land is up in here. She is an adjoining owner in the back here.
Okay.
But this has been in the Lacone family for years.
Okay.
Any more questions from the commission? Any questions from the public?
Letters to read into the record.
This is not a public hearing.
Oh, that's right.
Just kidding.
We do have some memos.
Yep, there's 3.
Go for it. There's 3? July 18, 2018, to the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission, from Kevin McGee, Environmental Planner, regarding Larry Lupone, Durham Meadows Subdivision, 500 Durham Road, Guilford, Connecticut, 06437, Assessor Map 85, Lot 46. The applicant is proposing to divide a 5.4 acre lot into 4 lots. The applicant has completed the checklist to guide low impact, I'm going to read that right, to guide low impact development - best management practices, and is utilizing several of the recommended practices. The proposed stormwater management system is to consist of roof leaders discharging to filtration galleries. The plans of the project have sedimentation and erosion procedures that are in compliance with the 273-97B subsection 6, parenthetical 6, of the zoning regulations. The western side of the property abuts the West River. As part of the proposed subdivision requirements, a conservation easement has been provided along the river, which follows the practice of adjacent subdivisions. The conservation easement is intended to protect the West River from the effects of development. The Guilford Inland Wetlands Commission, at its July 11, 2018 meeting, voted to refer favorably to the Planning and Zoning Commission and subdivision shown on map titled, quote, Record Subdivision Map, Durham Meadows, Durham Road, Guilford, Connecticut, Route 77, Guilford, Connecticut, Sheet R-1 and Site Development Plan, comma, Durham Meadows, Durham Road, Connecticut, Route 77, Guilford, Connecticut, end quote. Prepared by Anderson and Associates, dated June 7, 2018, Sheet S-1, with the following conditions: that lots number 1, 3, and 4 be subject to wetlands applications prior to construction due to the slope of the western portion of the property and the proximity of potential work to 100 feet in land review area. Recommendations for conditions of approval. Number 1, the town of Guilford, as zoning enforcement officers, should be notified to inspect the sedimentation and erosion control measures prior to site work. Soil stockpiles should be, where's my second?
That's standard wording.
Yeah, I can take it from the other one, right?
Yeah.
Silt fencing, stockpiles.
Yeah, where would I don't remember what that was.
Stockpiles shall be contained by silt fencing and/or hay bales.
Hay bales, okay. That's the end of that, probably.
Yeah, and then it would be soil and erosion sedimentation control measures shall be maintained until all site work has been completed.
Okay. Now I lost my.
Very good with those conditions.
All right, the next one is from the Town of Guilford Health Department, from the Health Department, to the Planning and Zoning Commission, from Dennis Johnson, Director of Health, dated July 17, 2018. Subject, Larry Lupone, quote, Durham Meadows subdivision, end quote, map 85, lot 46. Soil tests conducted on the applicant's proposed subdivision lots on May 29, 2018 revealed well-drained soils with conditions suitable for installation of on-site septic systems. Adequate areas exist on the proposed lot for locating both septic systems and private wells. Based upon Health Department soil test results, the site plan review it is it is recommended that the applicant's proposed subdivision be approved. And this is the last one.
We got one here, June 4th.
That's the.
Durham Meadows subdivision, the 4-lot subdivision off Route 77 serves 2 combined driveways, so there will be minimum impact on the state highway. There is no objection to the subdivision application as submitted.
Okay. We have a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion. Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a subdivision application for Larry Lupone, map 85, lot 46, for 4 lots as shown on, in quotations, record subdivision map, Durham Meadows, dated June 7th, 2018, revised 6/11/2018, prepared by Anderson Engineering and Surveying Associates. The application is approved based on the following conditions that were read into the record from Kevin McGee, the environmental planner. This application is approved based upon a finding that it conforms with the zoning and subdivision codes of the town.
Any questions, discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, Eric. Next up, applications to be received. Laura Tama and Christine Wallach, 71 Waterside Drive, map 8, lot 54, zone R2, coastal area management for a 278 square foot addition and 140 foot square shed. Receive and set a public hearing date of 8/1/18. Second? All in favor? Special permits, Claremont Remodeling, 541 Sawmill Road, map 85, lot 65, zone R5, special permit for existing 920 square foot accessory apartment located in the main dwelling. Set public hearing for 8/15/18 to be continued to 9/5/18 for mandatory second public hearing.
So move to receive and set public hearing.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, site plans. Bethel 1570 LLC, 1570 Boston Post Road, map 52, lot 13-6, zone PV2, site plan modification to allow substantial property improvements.
Just as a recap, you have seen this as a site plan before,
Back
Mr.
in March.
Adjemi, right, for two applications. One was for location of a driveway on the property, and the second was for just a site plan for replacement office use and some site improvements. Since that approval, there had been some work that had gone beyond the scope of that original site plan, in which staff had worked with the applicant to come back for a modification. So that includes, as Mark will describe, some site changes with retaining walls, but Mr. Adjemi is also proposing to add one residential unit in this for a mixed use as well, and replace the septic.
This is the old
Wire Journal,
Wire
yes.
Journal.
Yes, for the record, I'm Mark Young, I'm the manager of John Waldo Associates, representing Mr. Adjemi and the LLC, which owns the property, Bethel 1570 LLC. As Aaron said, this is the former Wire Journal property. There was a couple of site plans previously, which covered the majority of the work. This plan is that one issue goes 20 feet, the same as the other ones. Route 1 is here. The new driveway is going in here to the existing parking areas. That was all part of the previous plan. The issues that came up, I'll go one by one. There was a concrete pad for the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning right here. They decided to relocate that immediately behind it to provide a more favorable location for the equipment. Behind that, there was a wood tie retaining wall in this area. It was in poor condition. That has been replaced. And the construction company was not aware of the site plan requirements, so they went ahead and did that, but we're putting that as part of this application. Additionally, in the rear, I tried to make this understandable, but there's a walkway here, concrete walkway going into a lower entrance here. There's the original plan showed a retaining wall here. It slopes up, by the way. This is much higher than down here, and it slopes generally that way. So this retaining wall was proposed. It became obvious that it would be desirable to extend the retaining wall all the way down to the building. This is actually a fairly low wall, it's only 2 to 3 feet high. So we have another retaining wall here. And in this area, these new parking spaces were proposed on the previous plan, and that plan showed that this area here would be graded off evenly. There are several mature trees here, a lot of boulders. It would have been a substantial amount of excavation to complete that plan. So we've decided to leave much of this in its current state and put a retaining wall here which will protect this walkway and the adjacent parking area. This parking lot here, which again was existing, the previous plan, which showed the revised driveway, had this kind of dead ending down here. There were a couple of, these 3 parking spaces were added, but this was a dead end. That would have made kind of an awkward traffic flow. These diagonal spaces, people would have had to either back all the way out or back out, try to turn around down here. So I provided a connection through this area to the driveway so that this can be one-way traffic through here. The motorist can pull in, back out, and drive away and continue down the driveway in this way. The original plan had some site lighting here, these 3 post-mounted lights shown here. We've added 4 more lights, 3 up here in this area and 1 in here. We've had a lighting consultant analyze the lighting layout, and he has shown that the lighting intensity will reach 0 foot candles well before the property lines, which is this plan. This is oriented a little different. Route 1 is here, the building is here. The light is 0 foot candles well before the property line. In fact, this line here is the 0 line. So there will be no light trespass onto the adjacent properties. The lights specified are, the color is, originally we had 5,000 Kelvin. It's been revised to 3,000 Kelvin as previously approved, which is a warmer light, less of a bluish cast to it. They're all dark sky compliant fixtures, and we expect that the lights would likely be turned off by 9 o'clock in the evening. There will be a number of bollard lights along the walkways, which have minimal impact any distance away. They may stay on all night, particularly for the efficiency apartment. During the excavation, the septic tank was exposed, parts of the septic system were exposed, and it became obvious that the existing septic system, which appears to have been built when the building was built back in the 60s, was in poor condition, inadequate for the anticipated occupancy. So we've redesigned the septic system using modern construction, and it meets the current health code for the anticipated occupancy for the offices based on the square footage, and for a 2-bedroom apartment. I just had a comment today from Lee Archer, Town Sanitarium, concerning one of the existing trees here is fairly close to this system, this leaching gallery. We can move that a few feet away to avoid any interference. Additionally, the landscape plan did show a tree in here. That's been revised, to which I will now proceed. The landscape plan here, again, Route 1 is up here, the building's here. This has been prepared by Kenny Associates. There's a large tulip tree, a number of red buds, flowering dogwoods, and extensive planting of low shrubs along this steep slope, and the retaining wall around the new parking areas and along the front. Again, it's a fairly steep slope down to the street, so we're having some fairly extensive landscaping here. And the rest will be planted with native species. So I think overall, these are minimal changes. They'll enhance the property, make it more usable for the workers who work there. And the potential resident of the efficiency apartment. The residential use is allowed in this zone, and we wanted to add that as a potential part of the construction.
Will that be built, that'll be done and ready for occupancy? Or are you going to wait for, I mean, you're going to only build it out when someone wants it?
Oh, the efficiency?
Yeah.
Basically, it could be an efficiency now. The thing that's missing is a shower in there.
Oh.
And yeah.
Outdoor shower?
I'm sorry?
Outdoor shower?
But, so that I'm wanting to be able to have the flexibility to be able to use it as an office, rent it as an office, or rent it as efficiency, whichever I could get.
Quick question on the lighting. How close is the nearest residence? I don't think it's
They're-
very close at all.
They're not too close. There is, I believe the nearest house would be up in here on this property. But there's a pretty good stand of trees in between. It gets a little thin out here. But the house is more over here, and it's kind of cleared out here. So I think there will be, pretty good screening for any residents joining.
And the majority of the lighting in the parking lot will be turned off at night? Okay. All right.
Any other questions from the board? I've got a couple of letters. Who care to read?
I have one from Kevin McGee, the environmental planner. The applicant is proposing site plan revisions, which include parking, walkway, site stairs, ramp, lighting, and landscape improvements. The applicant has completed the checklist to guide low-impact development / best management practices and is utilizing several items in the landscape plan. The previous site plans for the project has sedimentation and erosion control procedures that are in compliance with 273-97B, subsection 6 of the zoning regulations. Erosion control measures have been installed at the site. However, the existing erosion control measures are not being properly maintained. The planting plan shows the installation of 6 new short-growing trees with site clearing that was conducted along Boston Post Road. An additional taller growing deciduous trees should be planted along Boston Post Road on the west side of driveway. The Guilford Inland Wetlands Commission at its November 8th, 2017 meeting approved a regulated activity with conditions for the construction of a new driveway and stormwater improvements. The work associated with the site plan revisions are outside of the Inland Wetlands Commission's regulated review area. In order to make sure that the natural resources are protected, I recommend the following conditions of approval. 1, the existing erosion control measures be properly installed, and the Town of Guilford zoning enforcement officer shall be notified to inspect the sedimentation and erosion control measures prior to any additional site work is conducted. Soil stockpiles should be contained by silt fencing and/or hay bales. Soil erosion and sedimentation control measures shall be maintained until vegetation is established or suitable materials installed to satisfaction of the zoning enforcement. Number 2, a white oak tree should be planted along Boston Post Road, and a 3-year planting bond be held by the Town of Guilford to assure survival of the proposed planting. 3, to assure future compliance of the stormwater management system in accordance to section 273-75.f of the zoning code, subsection A written maintenance and operation manual for all stormwater management systems located at the subject site. The manual should provide provisions for yearly inspection, maintenance of the stormwater system, and yearly reports to the town engineer. The maintenance schedule should include, but not be limited to, weekly, monthly, and quarterly inspections of the property for litter, monitoring the dumpster and outside storage areas, monitoring of the catch basins, Vorcentry chamber and the removal of accumulated material in the catch basins and Vorcentry chamber. The maintenance plan needs to provide a statement that the stormwater management plan be reviewed annually so that inspection/maintenance requirements may be modified, and any changes to the plan would require the approval of the town engineer. B, an as-built drawing of the completed stormwater management system prepared in accordance with Section 273-75.f, Stormwater Management subsection 6, in parentheses, construction. And C, the applicant shall file a maintenance covenant on the land record as required by Section 273-75.f, Stormwater Management subsection 7, Maintenance Covenants of the Town of Guilford zoning code. Are you fine with all these conditions?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address 2 points of those conditions.
Sure.
First of all, we have made great efforts to bring our erosion control measures into full compliance. So I don't know when that letter was written, but I don't believe that part of the letter is correct. Okay,
It was dated July 18th, 2018.
nonetheless, it's still in there, because we have corrected the silt fence problem, and we have placed TVS as correct. No, I believe that
I don't think Kevin was out there today.
Kevin was out
Yeah,
there.
his condition was that it was remediated, and if it hasn't been remediated, then that satisfies his condition on that point.
Very good. Secondly, he specifies an oak tree. Our landscape consultants proposed a tulip tree instead.
No, this is, it is a white oak.
Oh, they switched it to white?
Yes.
Okay, good, all right,
Yes,
good.
it's
So we're fine with the way. Very good, thank you.
And one point, I'm a little puzzled why all the stormwater issues have come up at this point. This, none of the changes, none of the revisions to the site plan that we're applying for today have anything to do with the stormwater. Those should have been addressed with the previous application. I mean, we have no problem with it, but I'm a little puzzled why they come up at this point.
The previous plan had shown 2 infiltrator chambers. Then there was a revision after the parking had come in to change the drainage plan that got into not the Vortechnics, but the other oil grit separator. And part of that installation and site plan approval is just the basic maintenance plan of that to ensure that the property, that it's maintained properly.
Well, that's fine. I'm just, it seems a rather late date for that to come up. Because all that was treated, that was part of the previous application.
We have no problem doing it with input.
All right, we got a letter here from Dennis Johnson, the health director. The applicant's proposed building modification will result in a mixed office space and apartment use. Location of the driveway will require locations of enlargement of the existing septic system. Soil test conducted at the site on June 25, 2018 to reveal suitable conditions for construction of a coated coupling septic system as serve the building. An existing well will be utilized to serve the community of the tenants and employees. Based upon the soil test results and site planning views, it is recommended that the application site be modified and be approved. The modifications will be approved.
Hearing none. Sean, you want the motion?
Okay.
Please.
Final stretch here. Proposed motion, Bethel 1570 LLC, 1570 Boston Post Road. Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approves the modification of site plan approval to include site improvements and 1 residential unit on upper floor of office building for Bethel 1570 LLC, 1570 Boston Post Road, map 52, lot 13-16, zone PB-2 as shown on the following. Site plan property of Bethel 1570 LLC, 1570 Boston Post Road, Guilford, Connecticut, by Waldo and Associates LLC, dated revised July 17, 2018. planting plan prepared for Bethel 1570 LLC, 1570 Boston Post Road, US Route 1, Guilford, Connecticut, dated July 17, 2018, and revised by staff July 18, 2018. Architectural plans, renovations to Agami Office Building, 17 sheets prepared by MRJB Home Designs dated March 16, 2018. The application is approved with the following conditions: that all proposed lighting as shown on plan be 3,000 K or warmer and dark sky approved. 2, that the Town of Guilford zoning enforcement officer be notified to inspect the sedimentation and erosion control measures prior to resuming any site work. Soil stockpiles should be contained by silt fencing and/or hay bales. Soil erosion and sedimentation control measures be maintained until vegetation is established or suitable material is installed to the satisfaction of the zoning enforcement officer. 3, to assure future compliance of stormwater management system in accordance to Section 273-75.f of the zoning code. A, upon approval of the site plan modification, but prior to the commencement of any work, the applicant shall execute an agreement and file a bond with the Planning and Zoning Commission to guarantee the completion and maintenance of the work required by the approved stormwater management plan. The applicant shall provide a written maintenance and operation manual for the stormwater management system located at the subject site and maintain the stormwater system in accordance with the manual. The manual should provide provisions for yearly inspection, maintenance, and stormwater system, and yearly reports to the town engineer and zoning enforcement officer. The maintenance schedule should include, but not be limited to, weekly, monthly, and quarterly monitoring of the catch basins and Vorcentry HS36 stormwater treatment structure. The maintenance plan shall provide a statement that the stormwater management plan will be reviewed annually so that inspection, maintenance requirements may be modified and that any changes to the plan would require the approval of the town engineer. B, the applicant shall submit an as-built drawing of the completed stormwater system prepared in accordance with sections 273-75.f, subparagraph 3F, construction. C, the applicant shall file a maintenance covenant on the land records as required by section 273-75.f, subparagraph 3G, maintenance covenants of the Town of Guilford zoning code. 4, a 3-year landscape maintenance bond be provided prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy in accordance with section 273-97B, subparagraph 3F7 of the regulations. The application approved based on a finding that it conforms with the zoning code.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right. Still to receive, Danielle Scarpellino, 643 Boston Post Road, Unit 7, Map 48, Lot 11, Zone TS, site plan change from restaurant to aerobic studio. Just receiving the application.
Move to receive.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of bills, Shore Publishing, $109.
Move to approve.
Any second? All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of minutes.
I move to approve the minutes. I read them, and they seemed adequately correct.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? We're all out of here.